So today's presentation is all about getting social, and I'm going to launch my screen so that you can actually see exactly what we're going to be talking about. So I'd like to introduce myself a little bit before we get going, so you know a bit about who I am. I'm a new member of the ICG and very excited to have found an online community with a shared purpose, which is about. So today's presentation is all about online communities and how they can be used for research. Just to give you a bit more background on who I am, what I do is what I call conversation strategy. So it's a consultancy that's focused on making conversations more valuable using digital technology and the principles of collaboration. So my background is having worked in advertising and research for 15 years. And so I've had a chance to really span both generations of research in some ways, the old and the new. So I appreciate the value of traditional methods, but I've also seen the potential in the new methods. So hopefully that puts me in a good position to help those of you who may be slightly put off by some of the digital methods, to hopefully consider them with an open mind and work out what their role might be for you. So I was actually classically trained in qual back in about 2000, which makes me sound a little bit like a ballerina, but you know what I mean. And then about 8 years ago, when I was at the research agency Hall & Partners, I saw the massive potential in online qual and went on to be Director of Digital and Innovation. So that put me in a position to be looking at online communities a few years ago, scoping them out, looking at social media, and forming my own views really on their potential, both in terms of their benefits and also their shortcomings. So I'm coming at this, not trying to sell a piece of technology, but actually with a very balanced and neutral view. So it's something I've thought long and hard about, and hopefully this presentation means you don't have to. You can benefit from some of the things I've gone through and thought through. And I'm going to now kick off if I can. So before going into the detail, I'd like to just explain a principle, outline it briefly, because I think it's something that's really relevant to online communities, and I'm a believer in it to the extent that I've actually named my company after it, and that's the principle of mutuality. So the image here is of a clownfish and a sea anemone, and they live in this mutualistic relationship together. It's one based on reciprocity, so there's this value exchange going on between them, and it's perfectly balanced, perfectly harmonious, because the sea anemone wards off the predators of the clownfish, and the clownfish eats various organisms that could indeed eat the sea anemone. So this principle of reciprocity and sharing and mutual value, mutual benefit, mutual exchange is one that really interests me, and I think it's a concept that runs through good research. It's one that runs through good brand relationships, and it's one that certainly runs through effective online communities, because it's really about thinking, how can we create shared value for the people taking part, not just value for the brands who might be in the old school method just paying people to give their time, but actually more of a two-way exchange of value, so everyone is ultimately benefiting. And I'm going to expand on that concept as we go. But I'm going to start with a bit of a classic qual question, something of an association test. So what springs to mind when you hear the phrase online community is my question. So have a little think. What is going through your head now as we say online community? Well, it might be technology. So you may have come across technology partners like Dub or Vision Critical, two examples there. It might be consultancies, so agencies that specialize in this type of research, the likes of Insights Consulting or Join the Dots perhaps. Maybe you're thinking of forums like Mumsnet, where you've got obviously lots of people with a shared interest talking, sharing ideas, connecting, building relationships. Or perhaps you're thinking of various social media platforms. No doubt you recognize those. I have no idea what that pink one is, but I'm sure it is a very well-known social media platform. But there's many of them as well. So this idea of what is an online community, already you can see it covers a lot of different things. And perhaps when you think of online community, you're thinking of the ICG, because ultimately it's a community of people. It's online. Just because it's email doesn't make it less of a community. You don't need a technology platform to define an online community, is my point here. It's about the people, it's about the relationships, and it's about this shared purpose. So I suppose the conclusion of just this intro is around the idea of there being many types of online community, and the fact that it can mean different things to different people. And today's presentation is really about exploring its meaning in relation to research, so you have a more developed view. So you can be informed by the theory and the practice of online communities for research, and hopefully you can end up with a clearer sense of its potential to your own business strategy and how you might want to or not want to use it. And just to make a point as well, one man's online community is another man's online qual. We're talking about semantics here as to whether one is defined community or not. A bit like the image there in the HSBC series where everyone can see things from a different perspective. I see 4 hours sleep last night when I look at that. But each person has their own understanding of things. And so in the same way, the point of online communities can mean a lot. And I'm going to explore in a bit more detail what the meaning might be within it. Before I do that, I'd like to just do another little association exercise. So what do you feel when you hear the phrase online community? What are the emotions running through now? If you really introspect and ask yourself, what are you feeling? I'm hoping it's not this. It could be boring. It could be something you reject. It could be something you don't think of as interesting, although the fact you're here probably implies it does have some interest to you. Maybe you're feeling a bit like this because online communities are new, they are different, they are a challenge to the status quo. They could be confusing, they could make you feel anxious, they could be creating a degree of I suppose, worry that of being left behind if this new area is such a rise and is so important to the future. But I'm hoping that at the end of the session, you feel a bit more like this, which I'm pretty sure is a positive feeling, judging by the picture. So I'm hoping you end up feeling excited and just wanting to learn more and feeling that you have learned more from today. Just to put this in a commercial context, the fact is they do seem to be here to stay. So looking at the GRIP report, which I referred to earlier on, they're actually second in the list of techniques used and considered by the industry. So 56% are using them, 26% are considering it. So clearly they're important, and that importance is growing. So what we're going to look at in order to get you closer to them is starting with a working definition, looking at how they actually work, some case studies, examples of them in use, some arguments for and against, and some steps and ways to actually explore using them that can be applied to you. And I just wanted to pull out these three core messages that I'm trying to get across. One is about working to your own definition and defining what it means to you, under what constraints you want to consider a piece of work as an online community. Secondly, and really most critically, it's about thinking of people in online community research as participants, not respondents. So the idea that they need to be nurtured, engaged, and given an active role rather than just treated as more kind of passive recipients of messages. And then also thirdly, just thinking about the potential in online qual as a stepping stone. That's, if you've not already done it, which I'm sure most of you have, it's a very easy way to start dipping your toe in the water of online communities because it's not a million miles away from it. So if you are interested in progressing, that's another area I recommend. So onto the definition of community. So I'm starting here with a dictionary definition of community per se, so not in an online context, but you notice there's three main ideas jumping out here. So first of all, this idea of a sense of place. So a particular area or place considered together with its inhabitants. So this idea of a sense of place, it's like a dedicated space. So in an online sense, this could relate to the platform that people are on. And for it to be a community, it needs somehow to be contained within some kind of borders. So it is this contained, separate place. That's one key idea that also applies to online communities. Secondly, this idea of being considered together with its inhabitants. This idea of a togetherness is really critical. And if applied to an online community, it raises this notion of this common purpose that binds the community together, whether that's the brand, the project, or some kind of shared interest or passion. So already you can see that the organizing principles behind online communities for research are a bit different from traditional research, where you're more likely to break people up. For example, in a group discussion, you might break them up by demographic, or just use a profile, things that are very much on the brand's agenda from a brand and business perspective. Whereas in this online community world, it's much more open, it's much more together, it's much more about shared interests, shared purpose. And that's a key point of difference, really. So going on to a very snappy definition from Forrester, 2008. I wonder if they have or would actually change their tune to this, because it doesn't quite work for me, but it's obviously got a lot of value in it too. And what they say is a captive, interactive groups of people online joined together by a common interest, which are systematically harvested for qualitative, I've actually added in quantitative, market research purposes. I don't really like it because it's got this kind of almost dystopian 1984 feel to it, with people and insights being harvested and captive. But anyway, there is value in it, in this idea, again, of implied containment. It's about having people in a place, having a certain degree of control over the way you interact with them. It's about having a common purpose, people bound together by an idea, and it's about having an embedded research process. You need tools that allow you to do research properly. You can't just do it without them. But I do find this is a bit too strict a definition, a bit too harsh a definition, perhaps. So my definition, as of today, is it's about ongoing dialogue with a group of people online who are connected by a common purpose and engaged in order to understand them better. Just to quickly pull out some of the points I'm making in that, it goes beyond online qual, because you've got this common purpose and it's about engaging them in a particular way to get them to participate with you. Whereas online qual could still be quite old model insofar as it could be more Q&A. You're not really going out of your way to engage them. You're paying them an incentive to take part, and it's much less about a common purpose. It's much more transactional. But in many ways, it's very similar because it's online, and you can understand people better. That's the purpose behind it. But also this point of ongoing is also key. You've got this opportunity to have an ongoing relationship, an ongoing dialogue. And again, that's quite a key difference. So what are we really talking about here? I thought it was worth just breaking it down and starting to give you some examples and case studies in a second to bring it to life. So who? Well, we're talking about groups of people online. It could be tens, in my view. It could be thousands. There's quite a lot of variation of scale there. But where is it happening? Well, it's, as I've said, it's this contained online dedicated platform designed for research. What? Well, online qual, online quant, and lots of different tools that blend the two, from polls to various other methods. How? Well, it's about keeping people engaged with more than just cash. If you've got lots of people talking, you've got them talking over a prolonged period of time, you can't afford to pay them 50 quid for 2 hours of their time. It just doesn't work, it doesn't add up. So it's about that engagement and how that's different. And why? Well, it's going to be about getting insight. It's in order to have ongoing insight that you wouldn't have had without it, flexible dialogue, and ultimately feedback. So I'm going to give you some quick examples of some of the main players out there, and show you the range of online communities and how they work. So this is an example of a Vision Critical, who you may have heard of. So that's more about big numbers. It's quant and it's qual. It could be around 5,000 people in one of their communities. They provide a platform. They also help with the recruitment, and part of that could require recruitment from brands and the customer databases they have, or it could be from email marketing lists, but it's not 40 quid a head from a traditional field recruiter, as you can imagine. It's also quant and qual methods, and the cost of a typical license for, let's say, 5,000 people over a year, you're talking about 55 grand just for the license. So there is a barrier to entry there, and because of the scale, you're talking about quite a lot of software service around running these things, and it's quite a big thing. Slightly closer to the work you're all doing, no doubt, is this qualitative angle. So the likes of Insights Consulting, platform providers like Dub. This is where you may have smaller numbers, anything from, I'd say, about 30 up to about 150 people is typical. They could be recruited through traditional methods, free found, or they could be taken from email marketing lists because they end up less expensive, or again, customer databases as well. It's much more about qual, so you can see the example of forums down there. You know, it's much more about Q&A. People are allowed to have their profiles, so it's got this social media feel to it, a bit like a pseudo Facebook Communities could run from 3 weeks all the way to ongoing, or 3 months. But 3 weeks is quite a typical number because it's still in this ad hoc model where a client is paying for a discrete project. So the example here, you can see from a participant's point of view, they come to this place, they see the Heineken page for this particular project, which I think was 4 designers, and they can have chats with other people on the forum. They can answer the specific questions that are being set for them. They get these newsletter emails telling them what's been going on, and they're being gathered and engaged in order to get insight from them. But the experience is designed to be more fun and involving for those taking part. An example here from the agency Join the Dots, which they kindly shared with me, is examples of the different tools that are available on online communities. So you can see in the middle there, you've got polls. You can see in the bottom right, there's live chat. In the top right, forums. And on the left, this visiting page where someone will land and they can be drawn into different conversations. So just an example of a few of the tools that get used in these communities. And so really we're talking about qual tools like forums, blogs, open discussions, could be mobile video. We're talking about online quant if you've got a big enough sample. So mobile surveys, online surveys, polls, ideas ranking, for example. But you've also got this community functionality quite often where you can engage people because they've got personalized profiles like in Facebook. You can even have performance tables of how much they participate and badges for successful participation as well. So it goes beyond traditional online qual software in that respect in order to keep people engaged and make it manageable. And here's an example hot off the press. It's not actually been launched yet, but Live Minds, who you may have heard of, have launched a Facebook approach where you actually manage people in a private group within Facebook, but then you can take them off because of this Facebook app they've developed into an online qual conversation. So you're actually managing them in something they're used to, and then doing the more controlled research in the online qual app. So it's starting to blend more and more with social media in that respect and these social networking experiences. And that's because ultimately it's about engagement. It's about how do you keep people engaged without having to pay them all a big incentive, because at a scaled model, it's just not possible to pay big incentives. Another example, courtesy of Join the Dots, this is a case study for Special K. So their objective was to understand the audience to help inform their communications and some concept testing. So they had 800 people in there who are actively managing their shape, weekly contact, looking at things like barriers to the brand, all the traditional stuff you'd look at in face-to-face. You can see the interface there on the right. There's different conversations, different topics, and it's generally a place for people to chat. And putting that in more of a, I suppose, a process look, you can see how it starts with understanding the target audience, looking at the language they're using naturally in these conversations between themselves, but also testing different creative ideas, pre-testing the work, and then once it was live and launched, because you've already got these people, you've paid for them to be assembled, they're there on the platform or ready to be reactivated. When it goes live, you can go back and talk to them, whereas in a traditional focus group world, you're not as likely to have that ongoing dialogue. So you can start to see how it's quite different, and it's got some advantages over traditional. And in many ways, as I keep alluding to, these communities do demand a different model. It's a different way of thinking. It's participants, not respondents. It's designing research on people's terms, not just on the brand or agency's terms. And that requires quite an investment of effort and resource into making it engaging. Here's a quote from Ray Pointer on the subject, when he said, online communities for research represent a paradigm shift in power and control towards participants. And it really is a different model in that respect. The world is not flat. Just mapping research according to whether it's on the client and researcher's agenda versus on the participant's agenda, and also mapping it across whether you're getting them to do the work because you're giving them incentives versus because you're giving them an engaging experience. Generally, online communities are pulling research towards this engagement participant agenda quadrant, and that's because, as I've said, to make it affordable, you need to make them want to be there. But also in doing that, it's much less about saying, right, you're answering these questions that my client wants answered, and much more about, right, I'm going to go out of my way to make you want to be here, therefore talk about some of the things you want to talk about. And that takes you to quite a good place in research, because it's what people want to say, what matters to them, and not so much just the client said don't go there. So in that respect, it's got another advantage there. So how do you get people to give you all this time? Well, Richard Millington, who writes a lot about online communities, not from a research perspective, but from a open digital online world perspective, and he pulls out these psychological drivers of why people want to be in online communities, and I think they apply perfectly to communities for research as well. So there's self-efficacy and the idea that people want to feel like they're making a difference. It's affiliation, the togetherness that you feel when you're part of a community. Status, if you're being recognized for your contribution, if you're feeling popular amongst the group. Discovery as well, because along that journey you're learning. All of these things are really actually very strong intrinsic motives. It's not cash, it's not a transaction, you're not being paid, but you are getting value, and it's value that can inspire quite a lot of engagement. And it's quite a much more natural engagement. It's not a bribe, it's about something that's genuinely valued, although obviously money is genuinely valued too, but you understand what I'm saying. So communities, in order to create this kind of shared value, they need a common purpose. They need something that pulls everything together. So here's another quote from Richard Millington. He says, "The challenge is to articulate a benefit to joining the community that both aligns with people's motivations and also places the recipient in a participating mindset." So you need people to make a comment, to answer your question, to contribute. So you need to nurture a community culture that delivers that. And you need to recognize that they want something out of it. You have to therefore put content in that they're going to value and set exercises and conversations in a way that they want to take part in them. It's not enough just to say, here's my discussion guide that perfectly reflects the objectives from the client, I'm going to ask you direct questions. You have to think, well, actually, maybe I need to turn this into a game, or maybe I need to find a way to make it fun for people, or maybe I need to find ways to give someone a bit of fame if they answer it really well, so everyone else wants to answer it well. These are all the kind of processes you have to go to in planning it. You have to get people wanting to take part. And this means having a common purpose that drives the community. So for example, if it was a community for Nike, you might be thinking about, I don't know, something to do with how to break your personal best, or about sports excellence, or something like that. So you're not just talking to people about Nike's ads, you're actually letting them talk about and contributing to those conversations around sport in general, something they're passionate about, which means finding content from the real world, putting it in there, and stimulating the conversation. Again, very different from a 2-hour conversation just on the terms of the client about a brand. So I'm going to pull out some of the differences now, because I think it's important to recognize them. No doubt you've already clocked they work at a bigger scale. And there's a couple of implications really of this bigger scale. First of all, they're big in terms of length of time. They're ongoing. So you need this dedicated community manager role. It's not a discrete project for 6 weeks that you do and then you're done. It's an ongoing relationship. So as an agency, that means different hires potentially. And if you're running it yourself, it means having someone else there who can keep it ticking along, keep engaging people. It's creating bigger volumes of content to analyze as well. So if you're having conversations with 60 people every week, you can imagine there's a hell of a lot to analyze, to pull out, to find the quotes that matter. So it's a challenge in that respect. And also it's bigger in terms of the upfront costs. You've got to pay for the software, you've got to pay for the relatively large groups of people to take part. So ideally you're getting more of a retained type of funding from the client. You have to make it viable, because there is this ongoing management. So there's this point that they're different in terms of scale. They're also different in terms of the stakeholder, the client who you're buying it from potentially, which is interesting for researchers. So not working necessarily with the insight guy alone, but looking at customer care or marketing or customer experience. Because when communities address those needs, there's people throughout the business that want a piece of it. And they find out that the insight guy's got a few hundred people on retainer available for research that's cheaper than normal, and they want to take part. And if that's the community that you're the gatekeeper of, then obviously that's ongoing revenue for you. So it's a good thing from that point of view. But there are barriers. There's barriers. Obviously, high setup costs, as mentioned. And I'm going to go through some of them as well. So there's this intense management is really difficult if you're in this kind of old way of working model. you're looking at, let's say it's 50 people talking over, say, 3 weeks, getting, say, 3 questions a day, which is a typical scale of a project. You need at least half a day of a moderator's time to talk to them, to say hello, to say thank you for taking part, to send them newsletters every couple of days to keep them engaged, to moderate the conversations, to probe them, to pull it out into ongoing analysis, templates, and to troubleshoot any problems that they might be having. You need support, you need technical support to do that properly. And it's, again, it's a slightly different model to be able to do that. I've already mentioned these kind of high volumes of content, but if you think about it in terms of transcripts, it's the equivalent of hours and hours of face-to-face conversations. And it really is too much to do if you're billing it in the other way. And there is this cutoff point after X amount of posts where, in theory, you can't look at every single thing. You can't take every single quote into account. So you start to have to be quite pragmatic in the way you analyze, which makes it perhaps less rigorous than a face-to-face where you're looking at all your transcripts. So again, just to highlight some of the differences. And then just continuing the visual strawberry theme. There's an expectation for speed. The strawberry is striking the milk at speed, as you can see. So once they've got and invested in the community, there's an expectation of fast turnaround projects. They want it done quickly. So again, you need this retained relationship that allows you to do that. And it's not all strawberries and cream. I only just thought of that. It's got some shortcomings. So going to go through some of those just to make sure it's a really balanced account, really. So as you maybe have already clocked, you've got these people, you're keeping them really engaged. Therefore, they're very sensitized to the process. They're not necessarily your average consumer. They're not necessarily as representative as they used to be, especially if that community is branded, and you're speaking to loyalists. You can't draw conclusions from them and say, I have a nationally representative view. However, obviously, because it's so efficient and because there's all these other benefits, the view is generally that that's a price worth paying, but let's acknowledge it. But that is one shortcoming about this idea of sensitization being less representative. Another issue is a general issue with online. It's more distant in some ways than face-to-face. You're not seeing the whites of the eyes, you're not seeing the body language, you're not in the room feeling it. So that same critique could be applied to online communities. Although I would also argue that you do get quite a lot of depth because of the nature of online. People do often reveal quite a lot more in some cases online than they would in face-to-face if it's a sensitive subject. But there is a point there that it's online and there are issues with that. Also, the fact you're not paying people, it's all very nice, this idealism of, yeah, they'll be engaged, they'll love their common purpose, they'll be taking part. Reality is people are people, and if you're not paying for their time, there is the risk that you're going to get dropout. You're going to have less control over how you go about it. You're going to have to over-recruit by more in order to get the numbers you need. And you know, people are rebels. You get the difficult guys and girls that might derail the process. So less incentives mean less control. And that really, for me, I guess, is the big leap that you have to make to get into this world. It's kind of letting go of that desire for minimizing risk or feeling like you are, and just trusting people to play ball, and trusting that if you get the design right, they will play ball, and you don't have to pay them these traditional incentives. The calculations start to change. And let's not forget, they do meet clients' needs. That's why they're really high up there in the most desired methodologies. Clients ultimately have new and changing needs, as we all know. They want things faster. They want to have the coolest stuff as well. And online communities, in many ways, starts to kind of tick those boxes. And it means that they're starting to be able to do projects in a different way. They're starting to be able to react quickly to things. The CEO says, tell me what's happening with these new headlines where everything's going wrong. And then straight away they're in there, the question's up, and he's got 20 verbatims and maybe a poll from 200 people, you know, a matter of hours later. It makes the research guy look extremely good. They want that. But also they need a lot more longitudinal dialogue. So the idea of ongoing relationships, more iterative approaches to developing ideas and content. So you have this ongoing conversation. You can show people what changed. You can do more of these co-creation types of research. It's less about this kind of ad hoc one-off piece and much more about ongoing insight. Also, people want cheaper ad hoc projects. So things that they wouldn't have been able to do before because they wouldn't have had the budget to do them. They can start to do them in this model because the ad hoc cost per project is lower because you've already recruited people and because you're not paying them as much of an incentive. So although there are these big barriers in cost in the way that you have to set them up, both in terms of the platform cost and this ongoing management role, at the same time, once you've done it, and if clients are using it enough, there's a cost saving at a unit level. So they're getting each ad hoc piece of research for less. And that's really the maths that they're doing. They're thinking, I'm saving money, I'm getting longitudinal research, I'm being able to be really responsive, and in effect, it's saving me less over the whole year. And I'm getting to do projects that I wouldn't have been able to do before because I couldn't afford it. So it's this quite a long-term view is required for a client to buy into it. And it really works because of the scale and the benefits of that scale. And I'd argue, perhaps contentiously, that there is actually more depth in some ways, not in every single way compared to traditional. But when you start to look at the sheer volume of feedback you get from people, when you start to consider that you can get these private one-on-one conversations with people as well as group discussions, and you look and add up all that depth of response to your questions, we're talking about more than you get from face-to-face groups in terms of quantity quite often. So in that respect, you do have this extra volume, which is a bit of a double-edged sword because you then got to analyse it and make sense of it. But I wouldn't go along with this idea that online qual is always more superficial than face-to-face because of this fact that you can get parallel conversations going. I think in some ways it can actually give you more depth. And also they're on researchers' terms as well. They do meet researchers' needs. So I'm going to go through a couple of reasons why. So probably maybe some quant people here today as well, but quant businesses have always benefited from this retained model. They know the money's coming in, they've got it over a fixed contract. It's all very nice and easier to manage the business. And that's something that qual researchers haven't really got so much. We're having to hustle for each project. It's a much more competitive landscape. In this model, you start to, as a qualitative researcher, have more retained business because they are coming back. And there's a degree of lock-in. Once they've invested in this community, the cost of going with someone else is actually quite high, obviously, because the fact they've invested in it so far and built up all this kind of social goodwill on the community. So in that respect, it's quite a relatively safer type of relationship, assuming you do it well, which is good for qual researchers. Also, everyone wants to hug a dog as long as it was hygienic. Everyone wants tighter relationships with clients, and because of that lock-in, you effectively can have these deeper relationships. There's more research happening. There's more fame that research is getting internally because they're the gatekeeper of it. And so you can build these stronger relationships with people. And generally, researchers benefit from being progressive. As you know, there is a movement in research towards these new methods. And clients are anxious sometimes they don't want to be seen as being stuck in past old-fashioned models if they're going out of fashion. And there's a benefit there to just being progressive, being open to new things. Driving into the sun probably isn't a particularly good metaphor for it, but generally there is a benefit on you as a consultant, as an agency, because of the progressive associations. And this is one of the harsh truths, I think, about modern business and modern consultancy and research. It's not one that I'm particularly fond of because I would much rather be given lots and lots of time to do something and go into great depth in doing it. But good enough is becoming good enough. It's good enough and affordable than excellent but expensive. It's quite a cruel sum, but you can see how, from a client's point of view, if they're saying to themselves, right, I get an amazing piece of research and I pay 70% extra, or I get a pretty good piece of research and I'm paying half. Is that difference between excellence and good enough worth the difference in cost? And when you break it down to a pound level, sometimes in this fast-paced world of business, the answer is no. They just need it good enough. And actually, they're going to start paying for just good enough. And people that are offering good enough at a better price are going to benefit. So this reality of our margins being squeezed, driven by digital technology and the efficiencies and these new ways of working and new entrants from different industries, not necessarily from research industries, all these automated methods as well, making things look and actually be relatively easier quite often to get insights. It's a reality that I think online communities and the scale and efficiencies you get if they're used properly start to address. So it's inevitable really that I think more clients will want communities. I think the scale of communities are going to change. It's going to become a lot more flexible. The idea of managing them using Facebook in private communities, I think that's going to be a big thing potentially. I think they're going to become a lot more agile as well, so probably more likely to be not so much this model where you're expecting people to come into a place and you have to engage them for so long. But I think they're not going to go away, and I think it is worth exploring how you can offer them and what terms you can offer them. It could just be through partnerships. It could just be through running them yourself. There's lots of different ways to get involved. So to actually explore them, I think for me, it's again, I don't really know how much online qual people have been doing, or mobile methods either. But to me, that's the best stepping stone, because if you run an online qual project with 30 people, you very quickly get a sense of the value in this and how to do it and the level of intensity it requires. And you're only a couple of design elements away from an online community, a small online community, because all you need to do is make it slightly more engaging, create this common purpose, and bill it in slightly more engaging terms, and then get to lower the incentive in theory. So the more you can dip your toe in the waters of online qual, the more you can get into it, rather than just default into the perhaps safer, more tried and tested face-to-face methods. The more you'll be able to really evaluate its worth. And in terms of what you can do more of, there's also these software demos. There's so many different providers out there. Simply going up to them, saying, show me how it works, explain how it works. They'll give you hours of their time. They've probably got lots of white papers and supporting documents. You can get very, very close to it without any cost other than your time investment. So it's worth going to those partners. Also looking at training. I partly say that because I'm at the end plugging my own training session, but obviously personal development helps get closer to them. And I think having open discussions with clients, because if they sense that you're just saying, no, online doesn't work, they're going to start to hear elsewhere from other people it does work. So it's worth you saying more of an open way, let's explore this. I'm willing to explore this with you. Let's do it maybe in a lower risk way where you maybe reduce your rates, or if you're not confident about it, or equally just going for it, because I promise if you apply the rigor and discipline you already have as researchers to these new methods, having done ample preparation for it, it will go well, because it's not really a fundamentally different skill. It's about asking questions in the right way. It's about analysing that and then adding value on top in the recommendations you make. So it's something that is bread and butter to you. It's easy. The only leap is really trusting that it works, trusting the technology, getting close to the technology. So I do think it is worth getting into, and not seeing it as a replacement to face-to-face. I see it more as a supplement for it. So it might be more like a pre-task or a post-task, and then you're still doing it face-to-face. But yeah, that's 4 things that I think can help you explore them.